I want to be very clear about something before this story goes any further. I did not walk into Zane Kang's life on purpose. I walked into his life because the universe has a deeply personal and specific sense of humor directed entirely at me, and because Noah, my best friend, my alleged ride or die, the person who was supposed to pick me up from my job interview 45 minutes ago, had texted me a single message that read, "Sorry babe, got distracted, come down yourself," with a winking emoji that I was going to bring up at his funeral someday as evidence of character. So there I was, 23 years old, in the single nicest blazer I owned, which I had borrowed from Noah and which was very slightly too big in the shoulders, standing on the 42nd floor of Kong Tower in downtown Seoul with my resume in one hand and my dignity in the other, trying to find the elevator that went down to the lobby before anyone noticed I had somehow wandered past 3 security checkpoints that I was absolutely not cleared for. I had been told, later, that those checkpoints had a combined security budget larger than most small countries. I walked through all 3 of them because I smiled at people and said excuse me and walked like I knew where I was going, which is, I have discovered, approximately 80% of getting anywhere in life. The other 20% is luck. My luck ran out at the end of a long corridor with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city, where I turned a corner and walked directly, and I mean with the full commitment of someone who was not looking where they were going at all, into a wall. Except the wall was warm. And the wall had hands that caught me by both arms before I hit the floor. And the wall smelled like cedar and dark expensive things, and something underneath all of that which hit my omega senses like a thunderclap and made every single rational thought I had been having exit my mind simultaneously through the nearest available window. I looked up. Zane Kang looked down. I need a moment. Even in memory, even telling this story from the other side of everything that happened, I need a brief moment to acknowledge what it was like to look up at Zane Kang for the first time at close range. Unreasonably, almost aggressively tall, with the kind of broad shoulders that suggested his suits were made specifically for him because nothing off a rack was going to manage that geometry. Dark hair, slightly longer than corporate standard, pushed back from a face that was all clean sharp angles and a jaw that looked like it had been created by someone who took the concept of a jaw very seriously. Dark eyes, long lashed, currently looking down at me with an expression that I could not immediately classify, not quite surprise, because I got the impression that Zane Kang processed surprises too quickly for them to show on his face, but something adjacent to it. Something that looked like the very beginning of recalibration. He was still holding my arms. I was still holding my resume. "I'm so sorry," I said, because I am, at baseline, a person who apologizes, and also because the situation seemed to specifically call for it. "I'm completely lost and I was looking for the elevator and I think I went the wrong way about 6 turns ago and I am genuinely so sorry about your—" I gestured at the coffee that was now decorating the front of his previously immaculate white shirt. "Your shirt. I'm so sorry about your shirt." He looked down at his shirt. He looked back at me. "Who are you?" he said. His voice was low and even and had the particular quality of someone who was accustomed to asking questions and receiving immediate complete answers. "River CO," I said. "I had a job interview. On the 38th floor. I think I overshot by 4 floors, which is a metaphor for my entire life, honestly." I held up my resume. "I have documentation." Something happened at the corner of his mouth. Something extremely small and extremely fast that was gone before I could fully confirm it had been there at all. "River CO," he said, like he was filing it somewhere. "That's me," I confirmed unnecessarily. A man appeared at Zane's shoulder, broad, dark-eyed, with the alert stillness of someone whose entire existence was structured around anticipating problems. He looked at me. He looked at the coffee on Zane's shirt. He looked at Zane's face. And something moved through his expression that he immediately and professionally suppressed. That was Marcus. I would understand the suppressed expression much later. "Sir," Marcus said, "you're 9 o'clock. "Reschedule it," Zane said without looking away from me. Marcus paused for precisely 1 second. "Sir?" "Reschedule it, Marcus." Another pause. "Of course." Zane looked at me with those dark eyes that were doing something I could not name. Something focused and intent and slightly dangerous in a way that my omega biology was responding to with enormous enthusiasm and zero permission from me. "Which position?" he said. I blinked. "I'm sorry." "Your interview. Which position were you applying for?" "Oh." I checked my phone with my free hand. Junior Content Coordinator. Communications Department. He was quiet for a moment. Then, walk with me. What? You're already 4 floors above where you need to be. He turned and began walking back down the corridor with the unhurried certainty of someone who had never once in his adult life needed to check if people were following him. They simply did. I'll take you down myself. I stood holding my resume for approximately 2 seconds. Then I followed him. Because of course I did. Because he was Zane Kong and he had just rescheduled his 9 o'clock for no reason I could identify, and the cedar and dark expensive things smell was already doing something catastrophic to my higher reasoning functions. In the elevator he stood beside me and looked straight ahead at the doors and said nothing for 11 floors. I counted. And then, as the doors opened on 38, he said without turning his head, "You got the job." I stared at the side of his face. The interview hasn't happened yet. "It just did," he said simply. "Welcome to Kong Enterprises, River CO." The doors closed. I stood in the hallway of the 38th floor alone with my resume and my completely destabilized nervous system and the lingering ghost of cedar and dark winter air. My phone buzzed. "Noah, how did it go, babe?" I stared at my phone. "I have absolutely no idea," I typed back. "I have absolutely no idea what just happened." What had just happened, as I would spend the next several months slowly and catastrophically discovering, was this. Zane Kong had looked at me for 30 seconds in a hallway on the 42nd floor. And something in him, something that had been locked behind glass for longer than either of us knew, had quietly, irrevocably, decided. Working at Kong Enterprises was, in most respects, exactly what I had expected. The office was beautiful in the cold architectural way that very expensive things are beautiful, all glass and steel and clean lines, the kind of space that made you feel both inspired and slightly afraid to touch anything. My colleagues were competent and professional and moved through the corridors with a particular focused energy of people who understood that working for Zane Kong meant performing at a standard that left no room for approximately anything. What I had not expected was Zane himself. Not his reputation. I had researched that thoroughly before the interview, the one I technically never had. Zane Kong, 31, inherited Kong Enterprises at 26 after his father's retirement, doubled its value in 3 years through a combination of strategic ruthlessness and an apparently supernatural ability to see around corners in business. Cold. Precise. Demanding. Not cruel by all accounts, but completely without sentimentality in his professional dealings, which covered approximately everything he did because Zane Kong, by every available account, did not have a personal life. What I had not expected was the coffee. On my 3rd day, there was a coffee on my desk when I arrived. Not from the office machine. From the good place. My order, which I had mentioned exactly once, in passing, to Noah on a phone call I had taken in the lobby 2 days earlier. I asked my desk mate Sora about it. She shrugged. "It happens sometimes," she said. The building had an account with the cafe. People got coffees sometimes. On my 4th day there was another one. On my 5th, I started paying attention. The coffees were always there before I arrived, which meant someone had placed the order knowing what time I got in, which I had not told anyone because my start time was technically 9, but I consistently arrived at 8:15 because I was, fundamentally, a person who was anxious about being late to things. Someone had noticed I arrived at 8:15. On my 2nd week I was working late, past 9, which I felt terrible about and which was entirely due to a project deadline that had been moved without sufficient notice, and there was food on my desk. Takeout from the Korean place 3 blocks over. My order, which I had never placed with anyone at this office. I sat and looked at the food for a long time. Then I ate it because I was hungry and it was very good. Then I opened my laptop and stared at my screen and thought very carefully about what it meant that someone in this building knew my coffee order and my food order and my arrival time, and was acting on all 3 pieces of information without saying anything about it. I had a theory. I dismissed my theory immediately because my theory was insane and involved the CEO of a major corporation anonymously feeding a junior employee he had met once in a hallway for 30 seconds, and that was not a thing that happened in the real world. On my 3rd week, the insane thing happened. I was in the elevator going up to a meeting, a small one, communications team, nothing that should have involved anyone above my direct manager, when the doors opened on the 32nd floor and Zane Kong stepped in. He looked at me. I looked at him. River CO, He said, like the name was something he kept somewhere accessible. Mr. Kong, I said, with the composure of someone whose heart had not just done something aerobatic. He stood beside me. He looked at the elevator doors. The floors counted up in silence. How is the position? He asked. Conversational. Unhurried. Like we did this regularly. Good, I said. Really good. The team is great. The Meridian Project, he said. Your revision to the third quarter messaging strategy. I read it. I went very still. The Meridian Project was 3 levels below anything that should have crossed his desk. That was just a suggestion. I probably overstepped. The brief didn't specifically ask for. It was the best analysis in the document, he said simply. By a significant margin. The elevator arrived at my floor. The doors opened. I stood there. That's your floor, he said, with that almost not quite thing at the corner of his mouth. Right, I said. Yes. Thank you for the feedback, he said. I got out. The doors closed. I stood in the corridor outside my meeting room with my laptop against my chest and my entire nervous system in open revolt and thought with great clarity, I am in a significant amount of trouble. Noah's assessment, delivered that evening over the phone with the enthusiasm of someone who had been waiting for this exact development, was considerably less restrained. He's feeding you, Noah said. River. He is feeding you. Do you understand what that means in alpha-omega dynamics? He is providing for you without being asked. He is learning your preferences and acting on them. He read your work. River. He's the so, I said. He probably reads everything. He reads your everything, Noah corrected. That is categorically different and you know it. I knew it. I just wasn't ready to know it out loud yet. The moment I became ready happened on a Thursday evening in the 4th week, when I was leaving late again and stepped out of the building into a sudden and aggressive downpour with no umbrella, which was a personal failing I was going to have to address at some point, and stood under the building's overhang contemplating my options. A car pulled up. The window came down. Zane looked at me from the back seat with the expression of someone who had been expecting exactly this. Get in, he said. I can get the subway, I said. It's 20 minutes to the nearest station, he said. In this. He was right. He was also looking at me with those dark eyes that did things to my composure that I was trying very hard not to acknowledge. I got in the car. He didn't ask my address. The driver already knew it. Of course the driver already knew it. We rode in the warm, comfortable silence of his car through the rain-blurred city, and at some point between the Han River Bridge and my neighborhood he said, without preamble, "Have dinner with me." I turned to look at him. He was looking straight ahead. His jaw was doing something very slightly tense that I was learning meant he was less composed than he appeared. Zane, I said. His name without the honorific for the first time. Something shifted in his expression. You've been sending me coffee every morning. Yes, he said. And food when I work late. Yes. And you read a project that was 3 reporting levels below your desk. Yes. And your driver knows where I live. The pause. Yes. I looked at him. At this man who owned buildings and companies and city blocks and apparently also my entire morning routine, sitting in the back of his car in the rain looking almost uncertain. Which on Zane Kong was such a foreign state that it was more devastating than confidence would have been. Yes, I said. He turned to look at me. Yes. Dinner, I said. Yes. Something happened in his eyes. Something that moved through them like light through water, quick and deep and completely unguarded for exactly 1 second before the control came back. But I saw it. I saw it and I filed it carefully in the part of me that was already, helplessly, irrevocably keeping a record of every small true thing about Zane Kong that he didn't know I had noticed. Outside, the rain came down on a city he owned. Inside the car, something shifted between us that neither of us named yet. But we both felt it. And that, I was learning, was how Zane Kong did everything important. Not with words. With the rain and the warm car, and the driver who already knew my address. Dinner became dinners. Dinners became the specific gravitational event that restructured my entire weekly schedule without me noticing until Noah pointed out that I had canceled on him 4 times in 3 weeks and was I aware that I smiled differently when I was about to go see Zane and yes he had been keeping track and no he was not going to stop. I smiled differently. I filed that away and refused to examine it. Zane took me to restaurants that had no signs outside and required knowing someone to get a reservation, and I ate food that I could not have afforded to look at before this job, and he sat across from me and gave me his complete, undivided attention in a way that I was slowly understanding was extraordinarily rare for him. The way he set down every other thing he carried and simply looked at me and listened, really listened, like what I was saying was the most interesting thing happening in any room he had ever been in. It was the most dangerous thing about him. Not the power. Not the money. Not the cedar and dark winter air scent that still hit me every time he was close enough for me to catch it. The listening. The way he remembered everything I had ever said, down to the smallest offhand comment, and brought it back weeks later with the casual certainty of someone for whom nothing I said had been forgettable. He told me things too. Slowly. In pieces, the way someone tells things when they have been careful for a long time and are out of practice at being anything else. His father's expectations. The weight of the name. The particular loneliness of rooms full of people who wanted things from you. Do you ever wish you could just, I said one evening, 3 dinners in, watching him from across the table, disappear for a while. Be nobody. He looked at me. Every day, he said simply. We were quiet for a moment. Where would you go? I asked. He considered this with the seriousness he brought to everything. Somewhere with terrible Wi-Fi and good coffee, he said. And no one who knows my name. I laughed. A real one, surprised out of me, and something happened in his face that I was beginning to recognize. The thing that happened when I laughed. The thing he couldn't control and probably didn't know he was doing. He looked at me like I had given him something. The night everything shifted, cracked open, restructured itself into something neither of us could take back, was a Friday in late October. We had dinner. We walked along the river after, which had become a thing we did without discussing it. The city lights doubled in the dark water and the air cold enough to make our breath visible. He had given me his jacket somewhere in the first block without asking, which had also become a thing, and I was wearing it and he was in his shirt sleeves and looking completely unbothered by the temperature in the way that large alpha men apparently are, constitutionally. We stopped at our usual spot, a bench overlooking a particular curve of the river where the city lights made the water look like something from a painting, and sat close in the dark and talked about nothing important for a while, which was the thing I loved most about being with him, that we could do that the silences were never uncomfortable but just present, like another thing we were sharing. And then 2 men appeared. They came from the direction of the parking area, moving with the specific purposeful energy of people who were not on an evening walk, and Marcus, who I had learned was always somewhere nearby even when I couldn't see him, materialized from approximately nowhere with the alert stillness of someone who had already assessed the situation and made several decisions. One of the men looked at Zane. "Kong," he said. Not respectfully. Zane went very still beside me. The particular stillness that I had learned meant the controlled surface of him had gone all the way down, that underneath it was something much older and much less managed. "Han," he said. Equally flat. What followed was a conversation conducted almost entirely in the specific language of men who have history and power and unresolved things between them, and most of it went over my head, but the parts that didn't were enough. A rival. Something disputed. The kind of business that happened in the dark parts of the city that Zane had never brought into our dinners. Until tonight, because I was here. The man, Han, looked at me, assessed me, smiled in a way that made my skin do something deeply uncomfortable. "Didn't know you had company, Kong," he said. "Didn't know you did, personal." Zane stood up. He didn't say anything. He simply rose from the bench to his full height and looked at Han with an expression that I had never seen on him before, something cold and absolute and completely without the controlled surface, just the thing underneath it, bare and certain and extraordinarily dangerous. Han left. Quickly. With Marcus as an escort that did not look optional. Zane stood with his back to me for a moment. Then he turned around. His expression was complicated. The control was back, but it was sitting differently, like it had been put back in a hurry and some of the edges weren't quite aligned. "Ezra," he started. "River," I corrected gently. "And I'm fine." He looked at me. Something in his jaw was tight. "He saw you," he said. He knows you matter too." He stopped. Like the sentence had taken him somewhere he hadn't planned to go. I stood up from the bench. I was still wearing his jacket. I looked at him. this vast, controlled, quietly devoted man standing in the October dark with his edges slightly misaligned for the first time, and I made a decision. I reached up and put my hand against his jaw. He went completely still. The kind of still that meant something in him had stopped breathing. "Zane," I said softly. "Whatever that was, it's okay." "It's not," he started. "It's okay," I said again more firmly. "I know who you are. I knew before I got in the car that first time. I'm still here." He looked at me for a long moment. His hand came up and covered mine where it rested against his jaw, holding it there, and his eyes did the thing. The thing where the control dropped and what was underneath came forward, unguarded and enormous, and looking at me like I was the only fixed point in a world that had been spinning too fast for too long. He turned his face and pressed his mouth to my palm. Certain. Deliberate. My breath left me completely. He stepped closer. He was very close now, close enough that the cedar and dark winter air was all I could smell, close enough that I had to tilt my head up to keep looking at him, close enough that the space between us was less a distance and more a decision. "River," he said. My name, low and unhurried, like he had been keeping it somewhere careful. "Yes," I said. He kissed me. Not like a question. Like an answer he had already arrived at a long time ago and was only now, finally, delivering. One hand curved around my jaw, the other finding the small of my back and drawing me in with a certainty that made it clear this was not an impulse. This was Zane Kong executing a decision he had made with the same focused deliberateness he brought to everything that mattered. I kissed him back with everything I had. The city lights shimmered in the river. The October air wrapped around us. And somewhere nearby Marcus looked at the middle distance with the professional stoicism of a man who had seen this coming for 8 weeks and was privately enormously relieved. Later, much later, in his penthouse with the city spread out below us like something he had arranged specifically for the view, he held me against him with the particular quality of someone who had made a decision and was now completely committed to its consequences. His hands traced patterns on my back, slow and deliberate and warm, and I lay with my cheek against his chest listening to his heartbeat which was, I was pleased to note, not entirely steady. "You're not as controlled as you think you are," I told his chest. The pause. "No," he agreed quietly. "Not lately." "Since when?" I asked. The silence that followed was 3 seconds long. 42nd floor, he said. 30 seconds. "You apologized for my shirt." I closed my eyes. 30 seconds. He had known in 30 seconds. "Zane," I said softly. "I own you," I said. Gently. Completely without arrogance. Just the simple, accurate truth of it. The arms around me tightened. Slowly. Fully. "Yes," he said quietly into my hair. "You do." Outside, the city glittered. Inside, the most controlled man I had ever met held me like letting go was something that was simply never going to happen. And I let him. Because some things are worth letting happen to you. 3 months. 3 months of dinners and river walks and his jacket and coffee on my desk every morning and the specific texture of being loved by Zane Kong which was unlike anything I had ever experienced because it was simultaneously enormous and quiet, vast in its consistency, in the attention and the care and the way he arranged the world around me without drawing attention to the arranging, and quiet in the way it was delivered, without declarations or performances, just the steady unwavering fact of it, present every single day. He still hadn't said it. Noah had opinions about this. Noah had opinions about everything but this one he delivered with particular frequency and feeling. "He has to say it eventually," Noah said on a Tuesday, eating my food on my couch with the comfort of someone who had been doing this for years. "It's been 3 months. You can't just do love at someone indefinitely without using the word." "He shows it," I said. "River. My dearest friend." Noah turned to look at me with the expression of someone selecting their words carefully and then deciding not to. "He bought the coffee cart in the lobby of your building so you'd never have to walk to the cafe in bad weather. He bought it. He owns it now. He will never tell you this." Marcus told me. I stared at him. "He bought the coffee cart," I said slowly. "He bought the coffee cart," Noah confirmed. I sat with this for a moment. "That's insane," I said. "That's love, River," Noah said, gesturing with my chopsticks. "Deranged, overcapitalized, couldn't just say 3 words love. I was still sitting with the coffee cart when my phone rang. It was Marcus. Marcus never called me directly. The fact of Marcus calling me directly sent a cold wire of something through my chest before he said a single word. "River," he said, and his voice had the specific careful quality of someone managing information. "There's been an incident. Mr. Kong he's all right. But I think you should come." The incident was a car. A targeted one. The rival, Han, from the river, had decided that the most effective pressure point on Zane Kong was the thing Zane Kong had accidentally made visible on a riverbank in October. Except they had gotten the wrong car. Zane's decoy vehicle, traveling the route they had correctly identified as mine. The actual damage was to property and to two of Marcus's team who would recover fully. Zane himself was untouched. I arrived at the private medical facility where Marcus had taken everyone to find Zane standing in a corridor in a shirt that had seen better hours, talking to three men in the low urgent tones of someone issuing instructions that were going to have significant consequences for someone else. He saw me. He stopped talking mid-sentence. He crossed the corridor in 5 strides and put both hands on my face and looked at me with an expression that cracked something open in my chest. Raw and unguarded and stripped of every layer of control, just the thing underneath, enormous and terrified and present. "You're all right," he said. His voice was different. Rough at the edges. "I'm all right," I said. "Zane. I'm right here. I'm fine." His hands on my face were very slightly not steady. On Zane Kong, very slightly not steady was the equivalent of anyone else completely falling apart. "They knew your route," he said quietly. "They knew because of me. Because he stopped. His jaw tightened. Because I was careless. With what I showed." "You weren't careless," I said. "I put you in danger." "You didn't put me anywhere," I said firmly. "Someone else made a choice to do something terrible, and that is not the same thing as you putting me in danger, and you know that." He looked at me. The corridor was full of people and none of them existed. "I can't," he started. Stopped. Something moved through his face. "If something had happened to you." "It didn't," I said. "River." My name in his mouth, rough and low and stripped of everything except what it actually meant to him. "I need you to understand. I need you to know that you are the—" He stopped again. And I watched Zane Kong, the most controlled, precise, self-contained person I had ever known, stand in a corridor and try to find words for something that was too large for the container he had built for himself, and come up against the edges of it and struggle, and I felt something in me go completely and permanently soft. I stepped forward. I put my arms around him. He stood very still for exactly 1 second. Then he held me back. Both arms, completely, with the total commitment of a man who had been holding this in for 3 months and had run out of reasons to keep doing that, his face pressed against my hair, his hold on me so certain and so complete that I felt it in my whole body like a key turning in a lock. The corridor full of people looked away with great professional diplomacy. "I know," I said quietly into his chest. "Zane, I know. You don't have to say it." His arms tightened. "I'm going to say it," he said. Rough, quiet, like a decision being made out loud in real time. "I'm going to say it because you deserve to hear it and because I have been saying it in every other possible way for 3 months and that is not." He pulled back to look at me. His eyes were very dark and very close and completely unguarded. "That is not enough. You deserve the actual words." I looked at him. "River CO," he said, and his voice had found its steadiness again, that low unhurried certainty, but underneath it was something new, something open, something that had been behind glass for a very long time and had finally, quietly, been let out. "I love you. I have loved you since a hallway on the 42nd floor and 30 seconds and an apology about my shirt, and I have been showing you in every language I know how to use except this one, and I'm sorry it took me this long to use this one." The corridor was very quiet. My eyes were doing something embarrassing. "You bought the coffee cart," I said. He blinked. "How do you—" A pause. "Marcus." "Marcus," I confirmed. Something happened at the corner of his mouth. The almost not quite smile, present and undeniable. "I was going to tell you." "When?" I said. "When were you going to tell me you bought a coffee cart?" "It seemed efficient," he said, with the perfectly straight face of a man defending an absolutely indefensible decision and knowing it. I laughed. "A real one, The surprised kind, the kind he had been collecting for months, and his face did the thing I had been watching for 3 months, the thing he couldn't control, and he looked at me like I had given him something irreplaceable. Then he kissed me, right there in the corridor with Marcus and 3 associates and various medical staff maintaining extremely professional sightlines elsewhere, and I kissed him back with 3 months of accumulated everything, and the city existed somewhere outside and entirely without our attention. Later, in his penthouse, with the city lights below and his arms around me and the long exhale of a day that had started terribly and ended here, in this warmth, in this certainty. "Zane," I said into the comfortable dark. "You own half the city," I said. "You know that, right?" He said. "And I own you," I said. His arms tightened. "So, complete." "Yes," he said quietly. "Since the 42nd floor." I smiled against his chest. Outside, Seoul glittered in the dark. Every building, every street, every lit window of the city he had built himself into a king of. Inside, Zane Kong held the one thing in all of it that he hadn't built, hadn't bought, hadn't controlled into existence. The one thing that had walked into his life through the wrong elevator on the wrong floor in a borrowed blazer and spilled coffee on his shirt, and decided in 30 seconds that he was keeping it.